and photographed over Phoenix. If you don't believe in UFOs, just listen. It could be your neighbor with the next eyewitness story. To me, we're faced with two major questions. Number one, are the UFOs ours or alien? Number two, why the media/government lies and covers up? We've had media and governmental lies about this, provable, stupid things to lie about, and they have been covering up a lot. President Bush jumps from a helicopter, and it's front page news covered by every Arizona newspaper, every radio station, every TV station, UPI, AP, CNN, CBS, etc., etc. To me, the only real news would have been if it were President Clinton using a Chinese open-on-impact parachute, which I understand was offered him. Isn't it suspicious about his knee? Wonder about that. Maybe so he wouldn't have to jump. No, seriously. A former president jumps in Yuma out of an airplane, and it gets to be news all across the country. Every news service picks it up. It's front page headlines in the Arizona Republic. It's front page headlines in the Tribune newspapers, who told me directly, we don't have the staff to cover this. Right. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Tonight, my guests are Tom King, and Tom is a photographer extraordinaire. He is a UFO investigator, and he has some terrific videos, and he has some unbelievable accounts. He is working very studiously on the internet and getting a lot of things out for a lot of people. He's doing a terrific job. Bill Hamilton. Bill's been here before. You all know Bill. He's the author of Cosmic Alien Magic and Cosmic Top Secret, two extremely good books, which are both available at Jan Ross Books and Tapes and Gifts. And Bill has been here before. He is an investigator who has been investigating for probably more years than we'd like to go into. And our other guest tonight, from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, weighing in, we have Miss Linda Moulton Howe. Now, you've probably heard a little bit about Linda if you're into UFOs at all. She began her television career doing documentaries and studio productions concerning science, medicine, and the environment. Ms. Howe has received local, national, international awards, including 3 regional Emmys and a national Emmy nomination for her documentaries. In '91, she was contracted with Paramount Studios, which is, I think, like Ebola. No, she was with Paramount Studios as supervising producer and original concept creator for an hour-long special based on Earth mysteries. That hour, UFO Report Sightings, was broadcast on October 18th, 1991, and January 25th, 92 led to Sightings, the series on the Fox network. Very, very successful lady. She's done reports for television and radio, including weekly news reports for the nationally syndicated Chancellor Broadcasting Dreamland, hosted by Art Bell. Larry King Live. She was on there talking about Nellis Air Force Base in Area 51. We're going to have Chuck Clark from Area 51 on here very shortly tonight. Promise, he's going to be here tonight. In Nevada, she also did The Other Side on NBC. She did Montel Williams. She has done Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1, which is a book she wrote about the UFOs. She wrote a book called Strange Harvest, and in 1997 she just released Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness, going to be released this year. Linda Moulton Howe will be with us very, very shortly. Speaking of one other thing that she appeared on, the Fox Network Strange Universe. Be sure and catch Strange Universe Monday. That's at 10:30 right here in town, UPN 45. That is the station where you watch Star Trek Voyager, among other things. UPN 45. It's going to be talking about the Phoenix phenomenon. Among other people who are going to be on will probably be Ozma and Willie. It was a flare. It was not a flare. It was not a flare. He's going to be on there. And Bill Hamilton is going to be on probably Monday and Tuesday, and yours truly may be making an appearance on there. It is on Strange Universe, and according to Bill Hamilton, this is the first time that they have ever devoted their entire show because it's more like a magazine of the bizarre. First time they've ever devoted an entire show to one subject. They found this so interesting. Jim De La Toso gave them such wonderful videos that he had over at his studio. A lot of the people have given them so much good materials. They heard so many credible witnesses that they want to do this for an entire program. And the time here is Monday, 11 o'clock p.m., Tuesday, 10:30, so you can watch it right after the basketball game where the Wildcats are going to win. So you don't even have to watch it. They're going to win. Which Wildcats? Huh, okay. Coming up, Linda Moulton Howe, right after these words. We're talking tonight with Chuck Clark from Area 51. Chuck lives up at Rachel. And Chuck, you've heard a lot about the goings-on down here in the Phoenix area, haven't you?
Yeah, for the last couple of days, I've been talking to several people that have been, sort of filling the details in.
Well, you sure wouldn't read it in the newspaper, that's for darn sure.
No, that was one thing that was brought up, is that there weren't any news accounts of it, and of course the military is denying any knowledge of anything, not commenting at all.
No, nothing. Now, tell me what's going on up at Area 51. Has there been anything unusual? Because a lot of these came... I think the first sighting, I've heard different stories, anywhere from Kingman to about 30 miles north of Prescott, and then they went all the way down to Tucson. So has anything unusual occurred up at Area 51 that you know of?
Well, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, there has been some new equipment brought in from the skunk works in California, apparently conventional in nature, but new toys for them to play with that have sort of throbbing, pulsating engines. They're only flying at night. They're flying dark. But that's all that I'm aware of out there right now.
This one object that Ozma and a number of others, probably closer to about 10,000 people, have seen, which is described by the Tribune newspaper here as light, is 3 times the size of a 747 at least. It has been described that it hovered for at least 5 minutes in one spot, and it also went from an area north of Prescott to Prescott in approximately 1 minute, which is 1,800 miles an hour, and it didn't make a sound. Does this sound like anything that you've seen up there at Area 51?
Well, I personally haven't seen anything of that size. I have seen things, glowing objects make moves similar to that, from a hover to basically a blur at very high speed and back to a hover again.
But if you're talking about that size is bigger than a 747, about the size of 2 or 3 of those, about the size... I've heard anywhere from 3 to 4 747s. It's that huge.
Yeah, no, the largest that I'm aware of that has reliable sightings up here, over the last year there have been 4 or 5 good sightings of an object about 200 foot in diameter. But that's the largest that I'm aware of here.
Makes for a real difference. And, of course, the military is being very oblique on this situation, which is par for the course, am I right?
Oh, absolutely.
Matter of fact, some of the stories that they're putting out are so patently refutable that it's absolutely ridiculous. The first story they put out was that it was flares.
Well, they use a lot of flares, you know. I haven't seen any flares quite that large, though.
No, and there was nothing dripping from this or anything else. So they immediately put out flares, and then people had said, no, it couldn't be flares because we saw this object that was this size. And apparently these lights that were on it, anywhere from 3 to 7 lights, lit it up. And they looked like it was flying in a V shape, but actually it wasn't. These were actually lights along this object. So, unfortunately, we have to have some good video here that we can send you, but there's no newspaper clippings from the Phoenix area. The only the clipping would have been from the Arizona Republic, which occurred Tuesday after this happened on Thursday, and there were no pictures in the paper.
Yeah, well, that's kind of surprising that there's such a lack of pictures for such a great number of witnesses.
Yes, over 10,000 from what I gather, and they have had literally thousands of phone calls going to various media and also to UFO organizations. Chuck, thank you for telling us what is or isn't going on over at Area 51. I think that's a very valuable piece to put into our puzzle as to where these are coming from. Naturally, there's a lot of suspicion that it could be military, but if it was military, it does seem like it would have come out of Area 51. Obviously, according to what you're saying, there's nothing really unusual going out of there right now.
Not that I'm aware of, and to get from here to Arizona would involve something, passing over a lot of area, a lot of people probably.
Right, and this also had a zigzag motion as it went through, so that kind of dispels that too. Chuck, thank you very, very much. We're back, and apparently they're here, and we've got a lot to talk about tonight. Welcome to about the only program that isn't using Star Trek as their theme. Thank God I found Space Odyssey 2001. We're on the line with Linda Moulton Howe. Linda, how are you?
Hi, Erskine.
Good to have you here.
Happy Easter to you and to all your listeners.
Well, I appreciate that. Happy Easter to you. Now, we've got some questions we want to ask. I already did the whole biography of you, so we all know all about that.
Okay.
I even talked about your new book. When's it coming out?
Well, I'll know next week when the distribution date is, and I'll let you know.
Okay, that is Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness, and it's going to be out very shortly. We've got some high strangeness right here in Phoenix. Tell me what you know new. Tell me about some updates, and we've also heard here a lot of reports on the internet concerning Ohio.
Well, you probably can update me on Ohio. In terms of the Phoenix situation, it seems to me, based on the faxes and the phone calls that I received, that on that night on March 13th, there may have been at least two different things going on, one being actual U.S. government jets in the sky monitoring what may have been truly an unidentified flying object or series of unidentified flying objects that were different because the eyewitness accounts varied. There were people in Phoenix, for example, who saw more than 5 lights in the formation of, as they described it, not really so much a V, but more like the curve, like a partial curve on a disc or a sphere, and that they were confused about whether they were looking at one large, gigantic object that had those lights on it, or exactly what they were looking at. One pilot up in Kingman, Arizona, called to tell me that what he had seen fly over and could hear sound, which was something that some of the Phoenix witnesses could not hear any sound. He said there were 5 jets, and that what confused and puzzled him was that they had their landing lights on, and that he had never seen jets flying in a V-shaped formation with all their landing lights and on relatively low, but he could see the stars between them, and so he knew that they were discretely different jets.
Linda, that story has been pretty much discredited. I was talking with Peter Davenport last week, and Peter said that this is one of the reports that was very bizarre. It was anomalous. He's pretty well discredited that.
Well, I talked with the pilot at some length about the sighting, and I think it is possible that 2 things could have been going on at the same time. It's consistent with other phenomena, whether it's in the animal mutilation category or other, where you will have indications that the government has something out monitoring or flying over areas where unidentified objects have passed over or have been.
Well, you know how interesting that is that Luke Air Force Base here said they did no flying at night, and they're continuing to say they don't fly at night, but if you live in Arrowhead Estates here, you're watching planes go off and take off all the time.
Right.
I don't understand how Luke Air Force Base can put out the information that there's nothing flying. People can see them coming out of Luke. Now, what is it? People are blind or something? They must think they're really stupid. If you're going to lie about something, make it something that's believable. They're also putting out information. They told Peter Davenport last week that, no, we didn't get any calls here, yet they gave out his number to the calls that they didn't get.
Huh. Well, in terms of what's flying in and out of Luke Air Force Base, maybe they have something that is not technically a plane flying in and out of Luke Air Force Base. I don't know.
No, these
tell
are
me what's
planes.
happened in terms of Internet reports on Ohio.
Go with it, Bill. Bill Hamilton here.
Hi, Linda.
Bill, hello.
Yeah, I'm here in the studio, and I just wanted to make a comment, first of all, on the Phoenix sightings.
Right.
Because we talked to a lot of first-hand witnesses here. Okay, first of all, we had no formation of jets flying over Phoenix. We know that.
This was up in Kingman,
Right.
Arizona, flying south, and because the pilot called, he was puzzled, and that's why he called me.
Right.
Was puzzled about why these 5 jets would be flying low, all with their bright white landing lights on. And some people had seen in Phoenix white lights, others had seen different colors. Therefore, if he was up in Kingman, Arizona, seeing these 5 jets flying in that V going south, I bring it up only from the standpoint that this object, this other larger object, appeared to have been seen by people also coming from northern Arizona down.
Linda, the object was not 5 jets. I don't think we're concerned about what we saw here. The 5 jets is.
I'm not trying to say that it was. I'm saying that there was a mixture of reports, and it suggests that somebody was monitoring something in the sky.
Yeah, all right. One of the very close-hand eyewitnesses, in fact, 8 people in Chandler, saw this pass right over their head. They described a triangular-shaped object. The object had a detail on it. There was structural detail.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and there was a V-shaped formation of lights. One of the lights detached itself, deployed into the environment, went at a far distance, and came back and reattached or docked to the primary object. Tom and I, and Tom's in the studio here too, we were out on a report in Ahwatukee, and we observed what we called the glowing orbs.
Right, that I interviewed you about on Dreamland.
Exactly. So there was more than one event going on. I'm not sure what the pilot saw in Kingman, but the witnesses in Phoenix are uniform in saying that this object was going from blimp speed. This is the way they described it, as blimp speed, very, very slowly. Some witnesses said they even saw the whole formation hover. Apparently the structure itself could change opacity, because one person could see the moon between the lights turn yellow, as if there was a structure there, and then later on.
Let me play for you, Linda. There were over 400 calls received by Peter Davenport. And let me play this really quickly for you. It takes less than 30 seconds. What Peter had to say about the Phoenix phenomenon, the UFOs over Phoenix.
Okay.
Minor by no means, Erskine. This was, in my opinion, probably about the most major flap that I have handled since I became director of the National UFO Reporting Center in Seattle about 2.5 years ago, July of 94.
You mean in terms of the number of people reporting to you?
Yeah, in terms of the number of people, the number of calls we took, the credibility of the calls, in terms of how you could almost plot the movement of this strange object that went over Arizona on the 13th of March.
Okay, now, it was probably one of the largest things that, as far as the plotting of it and number of phone calls, we've had literally thousands of people. You've had the same thing, haven't you, Bill?
Yes, I have, Erskine.
I was wondering what else was going on around the country, Linda, in terms of UFO, because I know you get a lot of research going into you. A lot of people contact you.
Yes, and I have had a lot of faxes this past week, but not just in response to what had happened in Arizona, but because in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Massachusetts, there have been a series of sightings starting back in January up until the end of February, in which I would say that they were closer sightings than usual, where so many are lights in the sky. There were a series of sightings in which people were describing a large object. One woman compared it to a school bus about 500 feet above her car, and that impression was reinforced because she could see rectangles that glowed as if there was a pale yellow light coming from inside the object that she was seeing as if windows had lights on the other side. And this object passed very slowly, and she estimated about 500 feet, sort of directly in front of her car. And there were other descriptions like that, as well as some other people described seeing an object that they compared to the size of a one or two houses that had a glowing red, pulsing color to it.
Now, Linda, where was that?
This was these two cases that I'm talking about now were in the Colebrook, New Hampshire area along the Connecticut River, stretching down along the White Mountains in New Hampshire, where Betty and Barney Hill had their encounter in September of 1961.
Right. Tom King is here, and he's a UFO investigator extraordinaire, and Tom's got a few things he'd like to tell you about what's been going on here. He's very, very good.
Hi, Tom.
How you doing, Linda?
Good.
I'm getting reports here that the same type of phenomenon that was seen in Phoenix area in Arizona basically on March 13th is taking place Wednesday, March 26th over they're calling the entire state of Ohio. Similar type of things were reported, V-shaped formation of red lights that would separate. These large orange balls were seen associated with it. They were reported to went up and went into the boomerang type of object, and there were military jets out that night too. And I have heard today that videotape has surfaced of this, and there was some coverage on this event on the following day in Cincinnati.
Well, see, it does make sense to me that any place that there are lights or discs or unidentified craft that show up, it seems that there always is some presence of U.S. military jets before or after, and the fact that they've been sighted in Ohio is really, in a way, consistent with the pilot's report in Arizona, that we had something out there probably following along with whatever happened in Phoenix. So the question I would have is, did anybody report the red lights themselves in the V-shape changing color?
Yes, we have a report from a guest who was here last week who said they changed from white to red as they flew over the Camelback Mountains here in Phoenix, headed towards Sky Harbor, flew through that area, violated the airspace of the airplanes coming in on approach, and turned red, then ascended and went up.
Right, I interviewed Ozma about that, and what I meant was, has anybody in Ohio reported changes in color in that V-shaped object?
Different witnesses reported the objects as red, sometimes in a straight line, sometimes in a boomerang. Some of these objects they also reported in a straight line were orange, and the color of white was reported too, as it seems very similar to the same type of eyewitness reports we have of the Arizona sightings. It seems identical type of thing has took place along with the cover story.
Linda, stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages. Okay, we're back, and we've got Bill Hamilton. We also have Linda Moulton Howe on the line from Philadelphia. We have Tom King, and Tom had a question he wanted to ask about pilots flying nearby. You think you'll find this interesting, then this will lead to the main topic I wanted to get with Linda. Tom?
Well, it's obvious from watching the 6 videos that were shot and several of the videos, planes had flown right by these objects. How come these pilots haven't came forward after 2 weeks saying, I've seen it from close range and here's what it was?
Okay, we've got Tim Rice, who was a flight attendant for a major airline based in Phoenix, which we won't go into any other details about. And Tim, why won't these pilots tell about it? What happened to you?
Well, Erskine, I was on the Cactus, that's the code name for the America West.
Well, we're talking about major airline here, right?
And we were flying back from Las Vegas, and we reported an object out the aircraft, and the first officer called air traffic control in Albuquerque, and they had nothing on radar, and we were visually seeing a large object. In fact, Sightings had a thing on it. But when we approached the airport, we were told by 2 FBI agents that met us at the gate. They walked right into the cockpit and had a conference with the pilots. They walked out, and the pilots told me to remain quiet, and they were told that they weren't to report anything, they did not see anything, they would not talk about it any farther, and they took them into a debriefing for approximately 1 hour after the flight, and they came out pretty scared, but it stopped them from talking.
Now, you talked, and what happened? You're no longer with
I'm no longer with America
Airlines,
No,
right?
I'm not. That's as far as I want to go with that.
Linda, is this par for the course? This may explain why we don't hear a lot from a lot of pilots.
No, I don't think this is par for the course in the United States in domestic airlines at all. In fact, I am surprised. And is this pilot? Can this pilot hear me?
Yes, he can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, my question is, did they show FBI identification to the pilot?
Yes, they did. The minute the jetway was pulled up to the aircraft, I was the first one to open the door, and they had to identify themselves in order to board the aircraft. That's just procedure.
And what did they show you?
FBI with... one of them did not have a picture on it, one of them did. But in 8 years with the airline, I'd never seen an FBI agent at an airport or at a facility. And for some reason at 12 o'clock that night in Las Vegas, they just happened to show up there.
What did they say to you when you first had contact?
Okay, they didn't talk to me. They talked to my pilots.
So you opened the door and they just walked past you with no statement?
No, they met us at the gate. There was a gate agent, there was a supervisor, and there were 2 FBI agents.
And what were their first words?
We'd like to speak to the captain.
And what did the captain say was the very first thing that they said to him?
I probably shouldn't even talk about it, but I can't talk about that.
Now, Tim, when you started talking about it, was that about the time that you were let go?
In August was the last time. That was the last month I was with the company.
Now, the other bizarre thing that's happened here...
Okay, so you weren't there on March 13th.
But Linda doesn't have anything to do with that. This was much before. What we're leading to is...
Hey, but that was not clear to me. I thought you were talking about an incident on March 13th.
No. What we're talking about right now is why the cover-up of this.
Why pilots won't come forward.
Why pilots won't come forward, why a lot of people won't come forward, and why there has been a media clampdown. This is the only program here. 5 days after the event, there was the very first article in the Arizona Republic, which is our main newspaper here, telling about the sightings over Phoenix. And who did they quote? An 11-year-old Cub Scout returning from a den meeting. Mm-hmm. Give me a break.
I am puzzled by the lack of newspaper coverage after that March 13th event, But if I'm unclear about what the pilot's date reference is for this incident, maybe others are too. Could you please state again, when did this incident occur when the FBI boarded the airliner?
That was May of 95, am I right, Tim?
Yeah, that was May of 95.
And what was the object that you had seen that night?
All right, we saw two large strobes, very, very bright strobes. We estimated the object was about 300 to 400 feet long at that time when we called Albuquerque Center. They didn't have anything on radar, and they called NORAD, and they said they had nothing on radar. But about 5 minutes after we left Albuquerque Center, they called back and said that they had seen an object that was a search-only object, not transponding, and it was very large, but they couldn't. That's all they could tell them.
Mm-hmm. And so after that, or when you landed in that date back in May of 95, which is 2 years ago, the FBI was waiting. You left in September. Did you know at the time what was the specific reason given by the FBI agents for why they wanted the pilot to not talk about this, or you or anyone else?
Oh, we understood immediately. I mean, we knew exactly by the time they walked on the aircraft what it was all about. And
did they use any words like UFO or anything else?
No. It was very, very quiet and very, very quick, and the pilots, I'm still in contact with the pilots, and they will not speak about it.
But do you have any idea what the FBI was so sensitive about?
What we saw. It was not of this earth. I mean, it was not our military. It was not. It was nothing like we had ever seen before. And the captain had almost taken an diversion in flight to follow this object because it was so unlike anything we had ever seen before. Mm-hmm. We knew immediately at the arrival in Vegas when we saw the FBI agents that we had seen and reported something very, very, very strange.
The reason that this was brought up was very, very simply to ask you, Linda, why this event here was not covered by the media, about the disinformation that's being put out by Luke, because they get in touch with Luke and they tell them one thing, and then they say there's nobody flying at night, and yet planes are flying at night. And the disinformation and the lack of information that is coming out. Any comments on that? Has that happened to other events that you've covered? What's going on? Because you've covered a lot of these events, and you are the key reporter for Mr. Bell.
Well, there's no question that the United States government is in an active cover-up and has been for at least 50 years. The exact reasons for why there is sensitivity in some sightings that are dramatic and not so much in others is a confusing part of this story. I'm used to talking with people in military and intelligence about some sort of a military encounter with either objects or strange missing time events in which debriefings follow, and they're always with civilian intelligence, and quite often some sort of narco-hypnosis is used, meaning that a chemical can be induced to some of these people to extract memories about encounters and incidences. When you are in the context of military and intelligence, it's not that surprising. But when you go into the world of civilian aviation, for the government, the FBI, the CIA, or anybody else to physically approach and come into a plane or to talk with pilots, I think that is unusual. And I guess this is coming to the bigger question. What is it that the government of the United States knows that it doesn't want any of us to know after 50 years, and why was it that that particular sighting in 1995 fit some sort of a category that provoked that kind of what I would consider more aggressive behavior by the part of the government with civilian pilots? and that's puzzling.
Well, we're concerned about what happened here in 1997, that this is the only local show that's doing anything seriously concerning the UFO over Phoenix and the UFO sightings that were seen here by literally thousands of people. This was seen by thousands. If you didn't see it, there's a real good chance that one of your neighbors out there did. Mm-hmm. So they have had a little bit of coverage on television, including showing scenes, pictures of this during the weather report on a number of stations. Mm-hmm. Channel 15 did lead off with it. Strange Universe is the only national source that has come in here and is going to do a report, and it's going to be on 11 o'clock locally here on Channel 45, but Strange Universe is seen all across the country. What I'm wondering is if you can give us any reason why the national media has been shut down. We had people call CNN, and when they called CNN, they said we can't do anything, where we can't go follow up with an interview. Mm-hmm. And Tom's got something to add.
I did talk to Britt Elders earlier this afternoon, and she told me that they did see it on CNN, and they did a quick blurb on it, and said the military was saying one thing, then it was saying another thing, and the object remains unidentified. And I think they did show just a clip of the footage from somebody.
Well, I can give at least an insight from my work in television from the network level on down that it was not too long ago, at least probably about 6 or 7 years ago, that I had conversations with executives in 2 of the large network offices in New York in the documentary news sections about wanting to do a documentary about government knowledge and cover-up, and had documents and had some what I considered at the time to be very sensitive material. And I was told by network executives that it really didn't matter what documents I had, it didn't matter what photographs, what film, what videotape, that as far as they were concerned, there was only one solid way or reason that they would ever do anything seriously in this subject, and that would be if the President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, all had a meeting with them and provided them what they considered to be bona fide government-backed proof. Otherwise, they said in this day of digitation that you can create anything, that video and photographs don't count, that as far as they're concerned, it is a non-story and a non-event until the government comes forward and says it's real.
Bill Hamilton.
That's a very interesting statement, Linda, and I wonder how many other events that are reported by the news that include video and what have you are considered not non-events, but
I guess a major event is like President George Bush jumping out of a helicopter. That's a major event that needs to be reported, and we've got to know the details.
There's videotapes coming from all parts of the world, and they do get shown almost as, don't you think part of the position that a lot of the television stations have taken is, well, here's another oddity, but it never goes deeper than that. Reporters don't have the time to try to go into depth on a lot of these stories, and so what happens is sightings occur. If there is videotape and photos, they may get a minute 15 on the local news, but there's really no context for this larger phenomena that's ever provided.
This is Phoenix, Arizona, with 4.5 million people, and I dare say that there were probably 10,000 people who saw this.
Right, and it deserved to be investigated. People needed to be interviewed that should have been covered in a much major way, and I'm so surprised by the lack of coverage in the newspapers if the television stations led the way, because very often television follows newspapers and newspapers follow television.
You know what I'm surprised by, Linda? I was taught when I was in school and in the Air Force that any intruders in our airspace would be met by our air defenses, our National Guard, or whatever, that we had a radar screen around the country, that interceptors would be sent up and transmit identification, friend or foe.
Remember those ads, sleep tight at night, your National Guard's awake?
Right, all growing out of our dew-line NORAD evolution.
Exactly, and then we have penetration in our airspace of an unknown, and this object, by the way, was described as 4 times the size of a 747 on approach to an airport, minimum.
By how many witnesses, Bill?
By many, many witnesses who kept mentioning how huge it was.
Who actually saw the little things on the bottom of it.
And how low it was flying, and how quiet it was, and how it could slow down so that it was barely moving and then accelerate. And they're all very, very baffled by this. And yet, I'm wondering if they're sleeping tight tonight, knowing that our Air Force and our National Guard are at work.
Didn't they tell you some story about how they weren't flying or something, Bill? You heard something about that concerning that. There was a story put out that they just were not flying at night. There was no planes coming out of Luke. And
that's true. Now, Luke is just a training base, and as far as I know, it has F-16 interceptors. They train pilots over there, and
during the day.
During the day,
they don't ever go out at night.
No, there are residents living in the area who see night flights coming out of Luke.
Well, there is an alleged government document with a 1954, that's 1954 date on it. It is known to some of us as the SOM-1-01 MJ-12 training manual concerning extraterrestrial craft and being retrievals. In there is a section that it is titled Press Blackout. It states that it is the policy of the United States of America in the interests of national security to keep the public and the media always at an arm's length distance from any of these stories, and it outlines and gives the specific explanations that are to be given, ranging from everything that includes the swamp gas and planets to a variety of other things, and I believe the word weather balloon is also included on this list. False explanations for true and really strange events that are outlined in an alleged government policy. Now, that was 1954. It's now 1997, and I don't think anything has changed, and that what we're talking about is that part of the government's effective denial of all of this is silence, as well as military bases saying that there was nothing on radar, or this was nothing but flares, or any explanation is probably still official policy, even though inside of the administration someplace, some inner sanctum, they know that something serious happened over Phoenix.
Well, they're following it to the max here, and I've only got 2 words to say about this entire situation. You're back with Linda Moulton, Howe, Bill Hamilton, Tim Rice, and Tom King, and this is Erskine, and it is Erskine's Fantastic Voyages. We're talking about the government media lack of information, which is nothing short of...
You're unbelievable.
Yes, it is unbelievable, the cover-up that we have been experiencing here in the Phoenix area. And Tom King has a question he wants to ask of you, Linda.
Okay.
Well, when this story broke, the media around town jumped on it and contacted the FAA, the Air Force, the National Guard, and the Arizona National Guard, who would know about military exercises going on that night, said they had no explanation for this. And when it hit the local news as the top story by 10 o'clock, they had remembered that they were conducting exercises and gave out a couple of different explanations for how these lights had traveled over Arizona, which didn't make any sense. And what do you think about all that?
Well, it's consistent with a phone call that I made to the Phoenix Police Department and a Phoenix Fire Department was Friday or Saturday, and they told me they did not know what I was referring to, that they had no such reports. Well, that could not have been a true statement. So that means that even a political decision had been made on the level of some of the local authorities for anybody calling who was a reporter to say that they had no information.
Yeah, it seems the updates we've gotten from the news, if they are going to continue to follow the coverage of this or update the public, is if any updates come in, we'll let you know. And I don't know what that type of statement is supposed to mean. They're supposed to be investigating this, not us.
Well, there's a bigger question here that I'd like to pose to you guys, and that is, if there is a formal and official policy that was set in order by an executive order written probably by Truman and possibly by Eisenhower or complemented by those two presidents, that set secretly a policy of silence on extraterrestrial contact on this planet, because I'm using the word extraterrestrial because that's what's used in these documents. And it is an official policy, and that applies to military and to anybody within the purview of that executive order. What can we now, in the end of the 90s, as a civilian citizenry, do responsibly that would help change that executive order and the sort of the political inertia of keeping all of this quiet? And as I say that, I'm thinking about this whole issue of what can we do for to get an amnesty bill that would release punishment to people who have signed oaths of following up this policy of silence and secrecy. That seems to me to be where all this has to head.
Well, we're doing some of it right now in programs like this that have the guts to put it out. We're also doing some of it on the internet. Bill, what do you have to say about it?
Well, Linda, today I got a phone call from one of my insider sources, Charles,
Right.
that I wrote about, and I didn't know this, but he had informed me today that he had a second visit in the park, apparently by the same man who he identified as looking like an FBI agent, and this time the man struck him and told him that he was still speaking out too much. And so this kind of intimidation apparently is still going on with these very, very, he was in the military
Right.
as a Marine, and he was a first-hand eyewitness to a crash retrieval event, and his father was also involved as a member working in the Pentagon, and so they're keeping a very, very close watch on what he says.
And why is it, after 50 years, what is it that the government of the United States Inner Sanctum that has been labeled MJ-12, what is it that they know that they are so nervous about that they don't want any of the rest of us to know? It can't anymore be explained that contact with an advanced culture is going to swamp the world. After 50 years, we've already got an entire generation of young people who have accepted that there's other life in the universe. This is not like a big shock to the world now. So what is fueling this continual policy of silence? I think that's what everybody has to ask their congressional representatives.
Well, maybe Congress is the weird place to look for it. I don't think we're going to answer all those questions tonight. One of them is it could be the Wizard of Oz who's behind the little curtain. And if it turns out that it's something very, very small in our government, then they lose a lot of their credibility. The other answers, there's a plethora of answers. So I don't think we're going to answer that. Linda, I sure appreciate having you on. Your new book is due out this year, right?
Yeah, later this year.
And you can be heard on Art Bell's Dreamland every Sunday.
Doing news and eyewitness reports in the first half hour.
Linda, appreciate your being on. Thank you very much.
Yes, and my best to Bill and Tom and everybody there. Thank you, Erskine.
Thank you for being on. That was Linda Moulton Howe calling from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We're going to continue to do updates on UFO activity and what happened here as we get more and more information about the cover-ups, about things that are going on here. We'll give you more and more information. Now, coming up the next hour, it is time for sex. Yeah, everybody here's nodding. Yes, it's definitely time for sex. That's coming up at the Bewitching Hour at 12 o'clock. We also have Phil Leverton, who is making his annual Easter egg hunt, which is coming up. And so it's going to be Phil and sex coming up at midnight. You want to hear what's new, what's going on, what's happening here in the Valley? This is the place to do it. Bill, thank you. Tim, I appreciate it. Tom, thank you. Any closing comments, Bill, Tom?
This case of these sightings from March 13th is still under a massive investigation by Moulton and other investigators around Arizona.
Now, Bill,
My
you have
last
a
word is
phone number to give out?
Yes, 404-7566 and look up.
404-7566. Look up. If you have any information, get it to Bill Hamilton. He will make sure it gets to the right people and it can be seen and get it out as well as possible. And we'll be right back after these messages.